was 16 when this happened. I'd snuck out of my boyfriend's house late at night, which was already nerve-wracking enough. He lived in the next neighborhood over, maybe a 10-minute walk from my place, and I had done it a few times before without issue. That night, though, I got a lesson in why I should have never done it in the first place. It was late, maybe around 1 a.m. The streets were dead quiet, and it was just me alone walking back to my house. And I wasn't too worried, just focused on getting home without my parents noticing. That changed fast, though. Halfway through the walk, I heard something behind me, and at first, it was just the sound of paws hitting the pavement. I turned around and saw a big black dog a few yards back. It startled me at first, but I love dogs, so I wasn't scared. I figured it was just someone's pet that had gotten out. Then it growled. It was not a warning growl either. It was deep, guttural, aggressive, the kind of growl that made me stop dead in my tracks. I glanced around, hoping to see an owner nearby, maybe someone calling it back, but there was no one. Just me and this dog, staring each other down on an empty street. Before I could do anything, it lunged. I did not even think, just reacted. There was a tree right next to me, and I scrambled up it, barely getting my legs out of reach in time. The dog jumped, snapping its jaw so close to my foot that I swear I felt the rush of air from its bite. It barked like crazy, pacing below me, growling, foaming at the mouth. I clung to the branches, my heart pounding, terrified that someone would hear and come outside. If my parents found out that I was out, I'd be dead. But if I stayed in that tree, this dog might actually kill me. I grabbed a thick branch and snapped it off. I don't know what I was thinking, probably just desperate to make it leave. I swung it down, hitting the dog hard on the head. It let out a high-pitched yelp and stumbled back, dazed. I did not hesitate. The second I saw an opening, I jumped down and ran like hell. I could hear the dog recovering behind me, but I did not stop. I ran so fast that I felt sick. By the time I reached my house, my chest was literally burning. I turned back for one last look, and there it was. The same damn dog was now full-on sprinting at me in my direction. I rushed inside, shutting the door and locking it. My whole body was shaking. I stayed by the door for a long time, listening, waiting to hear scratching or barking. Nothing. Eventually, I forced myself to go upstairs and get back into bed quietly without waking up my parents. The next morning, I woke up to my parents talking downstairs. At first, I ignored it, still tired from the night before. But then I heard something that made my blood turn cold. My dad laughing and saying, "Poor guy must have been out all night." I sat up fast. Something was wrong. I threw on some clothes and went downstairs. And there it was, the dog, sitting in my kitchen. The same huge, black dog from last night. The one that chased me, tried to bite me, nearly tore me apart. I stopped in my tracks. My dad saw me and smiled like it was no big deal. Found him sleeping under my car this morning, he said. Thought I'd bring him in, give him some food before we take him to the pound. I barely heard him. The dog was staring at me, not just looking, staring, hard. And its expression wasn't friendly. It was knowing, almost angry, like it recognized me. like it remembered everything. I mumbled something about needing to shower and left the kitchen so fast I nearly tripped. I stayed in my room until my dad took the dog to the shelter that morning. I never saw it again. To this day, I have no idea how it got under my dad's car. I don't know why it did not attack me again when I came downstairs. But I do know one thing for sure. That dog knew me, and if my dad hadn't found it first, I don't think I would have been so lucky the second time. When I was 10, my parents got me a pit bull lab mix for Christmas. She was the best gift I've ever received, and I even cried when I opened the box and saw her inside. I named her Daisy, and from the moment I held her, she became my best friend. She slept in my bed every night, followed me around the house, and never left my side. A few months after we got her, I started noticing something weird though. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and find Daisy missing from my bed. I'd call for her, and after a moment, I'd hear her claws clicking on the hardwood floors as she ran back upstairs to me. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe she just had to go to the bathroom or was sniffing around in the kitchen. But then it kept happening, and one night, I got up to see where she was going. I followed the faint sound of scratching and found her in the basement. The door was cracked open, which was strange because we usually kept it shut. When I turned the light on, it flickered and then went out completely. The basement light had been broken for as long as I could remember, so I grabbed the flashlight my dad kept near the door and stepped down. Daisy was in the far corner of the basement, near the old storage shelves. She was digging at the concrete, her paws scraping hard. There was already a shallow hole where she had been working. I called for her, and she turned to look up at me but did not stop. It was like she was in a trance. That's when I noticed something in the dirt. It wasn't just a hole, it was a burial spot. And I stepped closer, aiming my beam of flashlight at the hole. My stomach twisted when I saw what she was trying to bury. A human forearm. The skin was grayish, and parts of it looked eaten away. The fingernails were still intact. I remember stumbling backward, my breath caught in my throat. I was too scared to scream, and I bolted upstairs and woke my parents. At first, they thought I was having a nightmare, but when my dad followed me downstairs and saw it for himself, he turned pale. My mom called the police immediately. When the cops arrived, they blocked off the basement and started digging. They did not find the rest of the body down there, just more bones, fingers, a wrist. But the police weren't just focused on the basement. They started searching our property. We lived in a rural area with acres of land behind our house, mostly fields and patches of trees. After a full day of searching, they found more remains scattered in the tall grass near the back of our property. The body was in pieces, decomposed but clearly human. It was a woman, a missing mom from a nearby town who had disappeared months before. The police questioned my parents for hours, but we had no idea how that body got there. No one in my family had ever met the woman. There were no signs that she had been killed in our home. The police said she had likely been murdered somewhere else and dumped in our field. Animals had scattered the remains, and Daisy, just following her instincts, had brought some of the pieces back home. The whole thing was horrifying. I couldn't understand how my sweet, playful puppy had been spending her nights bringing body parts into our house. I had slept next to her every night, unaware that she had been sneaking into the basement to bury human bones. The case eventually went cold. No one was ever arrested for the woman's murder. The police never figured out who had dumped her body on our land. For years after, I struggled with the thought of it. Every time I looked at Daisy, I felt a chill. She was still my best friend, still the same happy dog who wagged her tail when I walked in the door. But at night, I couldn't stop thinking about what I had found, about the sound of her claws on the basement floor, about what else might have been buried on our property that we've never found. I never slept the same way again. I don't know where to start this, but I guess I'll just lay it out exactly how it happened. About 6 months ago, I started hearing something scratching at my back door. I live alone, and my backyard is fenced in, so at first I figured it was a stray cat, or maybe a raccoon. But when I checked, it wasn't anything small. It was a dog, a big one. It just stood there, staring at me through the glass. Its fur was matted, almost mangy looking, and its eyes had this unnatural glare, like it was constantly on edge. It did not bark, did not growl, just stood there with its lips curled slightly, teeth showing. When I knocked on the window, it did not flinch. It just kept staring. I grabbed a broom and banged on the door, and finally, after what felt like way too long, it backed away into the darkness. I started asking around the neighborhood the next day, thinking maybe someone's dog had gotten out, but nobody recognized it. A few people said they hadn't seen any strays around, and others just shrugged it off. That night, it came back. The scratching was worse this time, like it was testing the door, trying to get in. I yelled at it through the door, but it did not react. I called animal control the next morning, but they brushed it off, saying if it wasn't aggressive toward people, there wasn't much they could do. Then, the other dogs in the neighborhood started turning up dead. It wasn't like they'd been hit by cars or anything. These dogs were torn apart, eaten in some places, just completely shredded. One guy down the street found his golden retriever and dismembered right in his front yard. Another family's German shepherd disappeared, and they found parts of it scattered in the woods nearby. People started locking their pets at night, but it did not help. Whatever was killing them was getting to them anyway. The whole time, that same dog kept coming back to my door. Same scratches, same bared teeth. I stopped opening the curtains at night because I knew it would be there. I called the cops, but by the time they showed up, the dog was always gone. One of them even joked that I was just imagining things. I started setting up my phone to record the back door at night, but every time I checked the footage, there was nothing there. Just the sound of scratching, but no dog. Then, one morning, I woke up and saw fresh, muddy paw prints in my kitchen. My doors were locked. My windows were locked. I don't even own a dog. I stood there for a long time, just staring at the prints. They led from the back door, circled the kitchen, and then stopped abruptly, like whatever it was had just vanished. I did not sleep that night. I sat up with the kitchen knife, listening for any sound, any sign that it was still around. But for the first time in weeks, there was nothing. No scratching, no growling, nothing. And then, just like that, it never came back. I don't know what it was, where it came from, or why it left suddenly. Nobody ever found out what had been killing the dogs, and after a while, people just stopped talking about it. But sometimes, late at night, I think I hear something, just faint scratching, like a memory pressing against my back door.